Everyone always wants to know about the freshmen. Which players in the incoming class are going to make the biggest impact in year one? And don't get me wrong, that's always a fun conversation because the reality is no one really knows. And we had that very conversation here on this show last week. So if you missed that video, go back and check it out. I think you guys will enjoy that. But I've always felt what is a far more interesting and I certainly think a far more important conversation to have is which rising sophomores are going to have the biggest impact on the team in year two. Those guys have already gone through their growing pains. We've actually seen them on the field, at least some, and therefore we're better able to make accurate projections or more accurate projections about what those guys can do in year two. So with that in mind, I've got another top 5 list for you guys today. This time, turn the spotlight on Georgia football's top 5 sophomores who are ready to make a big surge in year two.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is Glory UGA Plus, where I bring you a small sample of what we've got going on the Glory UGA podcast. As always, this video is brought to you by our great friends at Alumni Hall. And don't forget, guys, if you like this video, if you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe to this channel right now so you get all of our videos uploaded to your YouTube feed, nice and easy for you guys to find. Like the video, comment, let me know what you think about today's list. And most importantly, if you do like this content, make sure to check out the Glory UGA podcast for a lot more content just like this. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. And it's a podcast designed for you guys. Chances are, if you are watching this video, you're probably a diehard Georgia fan. And that's who we designed the Glory UGA podcast for. So give that a shot. I think you guys will enjoy that. But all right, guys, we've got another top 5 list today. It's a top 5 Thursday this week. We've been having top 5 Tuesdays. Got delayed a little bit this week, so it's going to be a top 5 Thursday. But nonetheless, we still have a top 5 list for you guys today. And today, we're giving some love to the rising sophomores. As I said earlier, most people want to hear about the freshmen, like who's going to make an impact, who are these young guys coming in. It's exciting. But a lot of times, the rising sophomores kind of get lost in the shuffle a little bit. So we want to shine a spotlight on those guys and give them a little bit of love today as I reveal my list of Georgia's top 5 sophomore surge candidates ahead of the 2024 season. And what is a sophomore surge candidate? Essentially, guys, these are the sophomores, the 5 sophomores that I believe are in line for the biggest year 2 jump for Georgia in 2024. So that's what we're doing today. Let's go ahead and dive into the list. We're going to start number 5. We'll work our way up to number 1. But coming in at number 5 is a guy that I'm very high on long-term, inside linebacker Railen Wilson, who I think the world of, guys. I think he's a future NFL guy. But the issue for Railen Wilson, I don't know if it was an issue, but he got lost in C.J. Allen's shadow last year. Both guys were early enrollee freshmen, inside linebackers for Georgia. And it was C.J. Allen who saw the field earlier than Railen Wilson, right? He played from week one all the way through the season, appeared in all 14 games, started 5 games. Now, Railen Wilson will start some games later in the year, but it was C.J. Allen who made that first impression as early as week 1. But the fact that Railen Wilson did not play as early as C.J. Allen didn't really have anything to do with ability. It didn't. It was an injury situation. Railen Wilson got hurt in fall camp, and he missed roughly the first month of the season. If he didn't have to deal with that injury, there's a good chance he would have been playing as early as C.J. Allen. So he was a little bit behind C.J. coming into the year because he missed that time, he missed those reps, and C.J. Allen was able to get on the field, get that experience, and he kind of kept that momentum throughout the rest of the season. But let's look, this is no shot at C.J. Allen. Spoiler alert here, C.J.'s a little higher on our list. We'll get to him in a little bit. But let's not forget, again, no offense, this is not a shot at C.J. Allen, but let's not forget that it was Railen Wilson who is the higher-rated inside linebacker in the 2023 class. C.J. Allen was highly rated himself. He was a fringe top 75 guy, very highly rated 4-star prospect. But Railen Wilson was the 5-star. He was the top 30 national prospect, was once committed to Michigan. We were able to flip him. He came to the good guys, right? It was also Railen Wilson, not C.J. Allen, perhaps surprisingly, that was named to the all-SEC freshman team last year. And guys, that's a list that's our team that's not voted on by beat writers and the media. That is a team, those are players that are voted on by the SEC head coaches. And I know they don't always see every single game, but by and large, they know far more about what they're talking about with these players than random beat writers here and there for whatever team. So, you got to factor in this guy is a highly, highly rated, was a highly talented prospect coming out of high school. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a better player. Like we see it every year. Guys that are lower rated become better players. We saw it with Stetson Bennett. We saw it very recently with Lad McConkey. Just because you're rated higher out of high school doesn't necessarily mean you will be a better player. But I've said it many times. I love CJ Allen. I think CJ Allen is awesome. He might be one of the best linebackers in the SEC, certainly maybe the entire country this year. But if I'm projecting 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I think Railen Wilson has a higher ceiling than CJ Allen. I think athletically, he's got better physical tools. I think he's a better overall athlete than CJ Allen. Not quite as big as CJ, so maybe doesn't have the size, athleticism combination, but in just terms of pure athleticism, I think Railen Wilson long-term could be a better player. Now, will he maximize that potential? That remains to be seen. I don't know. But what I would argue is if both players, CJ Allen and Railen Wilson, maxed out their potential, I think Railen Wilson will end up being the better player. But right now, I mean, certainly based on what we saw last year, CJ Allen is ahead of Railen Wilson, which is why he's higher on the list. We'll get to him in a little bit later on in the show. But with Wilson being in the regular rotation this year, because he's going to be, guys, like we're going to have a rotation. CJ Allen's probably going to start, almost certainly will start alongside Smile Monday. That'd be my projection right now. But Railen Wilson is going to be in the rotation. And you guys know, you've seen it year after year after year. We have a stacked inside linebacker room in the age of the transfer portal. You got to get these guys reps. If not, all these highly touted 4- and 5-star dudes, they're going to transfer out, right? We've seen that with a number of guys in recent years. So you've got to get these guys reps, and these, if they deserve to play, they're going to play at inside linebacker. We will rotate those guys liberally, oftentimes from series to series. So even though he might not start, probably won't start, Railen Wilson is going to play a lot for Georgia this year. I project him to be inside that top 4 at the inside linebacker room, and those top 4 guys, again, are going to rotate all year long. So with that being the case, I truly believe, like, who starts, doesn't even matter. I think Georgia's top 4 linebackers, who I would project to be CJ Allen, Smile Munden, Railen Wilson, and probably Jalen Walker would be the other guy for me. I think those guys are all going to see very similar snap totals throughout the year. So I think we're going to see a big jump from Railen Wilson. A lot like CJ Allen, when he was out there on the field, he flashed and you could see the potential. You could see the athleticism. You could see how good he's going to be in spurts. But you also saw a guy who might have been ahead of the game for your typical freshman, but was out there thinking too much. And that's what freshmen do. It's okay. It happens. Like, you're not completely comfortable with the system. Like, it's one thing to sit in a meeting room and answer a question and know it, but when you're out there and the bullets are flying, sometimes you're thinking too much and your reactions are a step slow and you're not following your keys as much. And you would see that from time to time with Railen Wilson, with CJ Allen as well. We'll get that later on. But you would see that from time to time with Railen Wilson. I don't think that will be nearly as much of an issue this year. In fact, I don't think it'll be really much of an issue at all because, again, he's gone through growing pains. The athleticism is there. The physical tools are there. The opportunity is going to be there this year. I fully expect Railen Wilson to be a big part of the Georgia defense this year. And, in fact, I think by the end of the season, there's a decent chance, maybe even a good chance, that your average Georgia fan is going to be talking about Railen Wilson the way they've been talking about CJ Allen for the past 6, 7, or 8 months. So really high on Railen Wilson. Got him coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 on our sophomore surge list is another guy that I'm very, very high on. Another guy who saw some playing time last year. Not a ton, but did get his feet wet. And that is big defensive lineman Jordan Hall, who, yes, big, strong, another former 5-star. This guy, not a linebacker, but a defensive lineman. Now, he arrived as a former 5-star with big expectations ahead of last year to be the next great Georgia defensive lineman in that long line of great Georgia defensive linemen in the Kirby Smart era. But as is often the case with freshman linemen, whether it's defensive line or offensive line, I say this all the time, talking about freshmen coming in, trying to make an impact. If you're playing in the trenches, that's a tough spot to make an impact in year 1, right? Because you're going against grown men. It's the most physical place to play. And oftentimes, true freshmen in the trenches just aren't ready for that yet. They're just not. It takes a little bit of time, right? So like most freshmen playing in the trenches, Hall was hit or miss last year. I think I would probably say more miss than hit, but like Railen Wilson, had moments where you're like, okay, I see it. I see why this guy was a 5-star. I see what he's going to be in the future, but right now he just doesn't do it consistently, right? I mean, physically, it wasn't so much an issue for him physically last year. I mean, he was a big dude last year, 6'4", about 315, 320. Going this year, he's listed at 6'4", 320, so he was playing at about that last year. It wasn't a physicality thing. At times, a lot like Railen Wilson, some of the other freshmen. Again, freshmen just makes sense. Didn't always seem to know what was going on. And if you don't really know what's going on, you can't play 100 miles an hour because you're thinking too much, you're questioning, you're hesitant, right? And I do think there were times when Jordan Hall was out there that he wasn't playing full go. And that's not me calling Jordan Hall lazy. I don't think that's the case whatsoever. Again, he's a freshman, and he had to learn what to do and wasn't sure. If you're not sure, you don't do it fully, right? So I think that was an issue. I think technically, again, flashed, but technically was very inconsistent with leverage, hand placement, things like that. And those are things that he's going to improve on throughout the offseason, carrying over into this 2024 season. So, the physical tools, again, that's never been in question. If you go back and you watch his highlight tapes in high school, I know it's high school guys, but even like watch the All-Star, I don't know if you can find it, go back and watch some of the All-Star game footage, some of the practice footage. This guy was tearing it up against the best offensive lineman in the country during that All-Star week. So he's got the physical tools. He was learning how to play the position last year. If G-Day was an indication, he's certainly much further along in learning how to play that position. Certainly not a finished product yet, but closer to being a finished product than he was at any point last year. He's gone through those growing pains, was getting great reviews coming out of spring practice, played a lot with the number one defense during G-Day. And here's the kicker, guys, when it comes to a guy like Jordan Hall. We need the dude. We need him, man. Like, I'm not saying we don't have other defensive linemen, but what I said last year about Jordan Hall coming into the season was, I don't know if we're going to get that much from him because he's a true freshman playing on the lines of scrimmage. As I said, tough, right? But it would be awesome for us if Jordan Hall was that guy from like the jump. Now, that's asking a lot. He wasn't that guy from the jump. It would have been awesome for us because if you took every one of our defensive linemen that are on the roster right now and you said, okay, every single one of them are going to max out their potential. Who's going to be the best guy? Who will be the best player? And to me, it's hands down Jordan Hall. I think he has the most potential, the highest ceiling of any defensive lineman on our team. So if he can get closer to being that guy, closer to reaching a ceiling this year, which I think he'll certainly get closer, how much closer, that's what remains to be seen. But the guy's potential is off the charts. He's got everything you could ask for, everything you could want, and a guy to be a dominant interior defensive lineman in the SEC in college football, a potential first-round guy if he can just translate to the field and figure it out. So I think he's going to take a bigger step forward this year. Certainly, again, if G-Day was any indication, I think he's going to play early. I think he's going to play often because he does have the opportunities. We have other guys. He's not going to start, but you lose a guy like Zion Logue, he's going to be in the rotation. We're going to need him this year. He's going to have opportunities. I think he'll grow more and more as the season goes on. And as the season progresses, I do believe that Jordan Hall will likely grow into an impact player for Georgia. Will it be as early as week 1 against Clemson? I hope so. That'd be fantastic. I don't know that, but I do think the more and more he gets reps, right, the more experience he gets out there, the better version of Jordan Hall we're going to see. I think by the end of the year, if not earlier, he will be a big-time impact player for Georgia on the defensive line. All right, coming in number 3, let's get the offensive players. We haven't done an offensive guy yet. Let's go with running back Roderick Robinson. Now, he's a guy that did play early last year. He played a fair amount the first 3 games, had 15 carries over the first 3 games, but he suffered a high ankle sprain against South Carolina in week 3 and did not carry the ball again until I think it was November 11th when we played Ole Miss. So he went essentially 2 full months without a snap or without carrying the football, dealing with that high ankle sprain, which is a tough injury. That's what Brock Bowers and Marius Mims were also dealing with. So 15 carries over the first 3 games, ended up with 24 carries for 196 yards on the year. Now, like, those aren't spectacular numbers. Those are very modest numbers, to be honest with you. But, dude, I don't care about the numbers. That's not like, I'm not going to project how good he's going to be just based on the numbers alone. Like, that's not what I care about. What I care about is what we saw from Roderick Robinson as the season went on. Once he got back from that ankle injury, we saw a different guy. And we saw a guy that I think can carry that over this year and be a major contributor for Georgia. It certainly be in the rotation running back, potentially one of our top 2 backs here, and probably likely one of our top 2 running backs this year. And the thing about Roderick Robinson is he's a big dude. The guy's a big dude. So he's 6 foot 240. And last year, man, I'd be hard pressed to say he was playing at 240. I think he's probably playing heavier than that. I've told the story many times on the podcast, but if you're finding this show for the first time, I'll just throw it out here real quick. So I live in Athens. I'm an Athens local. And so last summer, about this time last summer, ahead of fall camp, my wife and I were walking in the Blind Pig, I think probably on a Friday. And we walk in, like one of the tables like right there as soon as you walk in is clearly some football players. So you see them at the corner of your eye, like, when you see football players, big dudes, right? So, I don't want to be that guy who's like staring at them, like going to ask for autographs. No, I'm not going to do that, right? But, sitting there at the Blind Pig, you just look around and you see these guys. And I see Roderick Robinson. I know him because I follow recruiting very closely, see his face, recognize him, right? And then he stands up as they're about to leave. I'm like, whoa. And like, dude, no offense. I'm not trying to like rip the guy. I'm just trying to lay this out for you, like why I think he can be better this year. When he stood up, let's just say he had a lot more weight in places you would not typically think a running back should have weight, right? It was pretty shocking to see where some of that weight was, if you get where I'm going with this. So he was a big back. He is a big back, still a big back. But when he came back from the injury, the weight got redistributed. He had slimmed up some, right? And he was moving better. That was my criticism of Roderick Robinson early last year. I mean, he was getting those snaps and those carries in the first 3 weeks of the season. He's a big back, but he's not running big. Like, he's not running through tackles. Like, he's going down at first contact. And if you're a big back who's not the most explosive guy on the field, he's explosive enough for a guy his size. He's not like crazy explosive. So if you're a big back and you're not running big, what value do you have for us at the running back position? And those are some serious questions I was having those first 3 weeks. But again, when he came back from that injury late in the season and he started to get some more carries, we saw a different guy, all right? We saw a guy who was getting slimmed up, still big, but slimmed up, looked more explosive, was running harder than he was early in the year, was running through tackles, showed very impressive contact balance, which he was not really showing all that much early in the year. And I know that was a small sample size. Talking about a couple carries against Ole Miss, talking about some carries against Florida State, and then you carry WC and G-Day as well. But I saw what I needed to see to project towards the future, right? He showed me what I need to see. That's what I need to see from Ryan. I need to see him be able to run through tackles. He's always had good footwork for a big guy. You can go back and watch his high school tape. He had that good footwork. And even last year, he had the good footwork. But I need to see more power. And we started to see that. There was one play in particular, you're probably going to see here on the clips I've got for you guys. At G-Day, I mean, we love C.J. Allen. I'll talk about him later on. But there was a play early, I think in the first quarter, one of the first couple of drives, where Roderick Robinson, it wasn't a huge gain, but C.J. Allen met him in the hole, and he flat out ran over C.J. Allen. And C.J. Allen's likely going to be an all-SEC type guy this year. He just flat out ran him over. He wasn't doing that early last year. He's doing it now. So I think that's a really strong sign of what he's going to be for us this year. And here's the other thing, too. You need to have talent, like with the freshmen. You also need opportunity. And I think there's a really strong chance that Roderick Robinson, week 1, is going to be the feature back for Georgia. I think there's a very strong chance. Now, I don't know for sure if Tariq Etienne will be suspended. All I can say is you go back and you look at recent history of Kirby Smart and players who have been charged with DUIs, like Javon Bullard in 2022 after the Auburn game, got charged with DUI, next week against Missouri, was suspended, did not play. I think there's a strong chance that Etienne does not play. If he doesn't play, who's going to be our top back against Clemson? It's going to be Roderick Robinson. He's essentially the only guy with any kind of experience. Like you can say Cash Jones, but if we're going to that game against Clemson and Cash Jones, like no offense, dude, if he's our lead option at running back, don't like those odds. I don't like that at all. I think Roderick Robinson will be that guy. And if he takes advantage of those opportunities, he'll see even more reps as the season goes on. Even once Etienne gets back, I think it's going to be Etienne and Roderick Robinson. That's going to be the 1-2 punch this year. So I think he's going to get opportunities. He showed those signs at the end of last year throughout spring practice. So I think he's going to play a lot for Georgia. I think he's going to make the most of those opportunities. And the only reason that Roderick Robinson is not higher on this list, and he's at number 3, not number 2 or 1, is I don't expect him to start. Again, I think he'll be one of the top 2 backs, but I don't think he'll be the feature back once Etienne gets back and he's fully cleared to go. And the guys that have it number 2 and number 1, I think both those guys will start for Georgia in their true sophomore years. But love Roderick Robinson. Think he'll have a major impact on the Georgia offense this year. All right, number 2, I've got star defender, you can just say DB, Joenel Aguero. Now, I was very high on Joenel Aguero coming out of high school. In fact, this time last year, I was telling everyone on the podcast, I thought he had a legitimate shot to push Tyke Smith for that starting role at Georgia's star position. Now, it didn't work out that way. I was wrong on that. I own that. Kind of broke my own rule about expecting too much out of true freshmen. I always say it, like, you can't be in a position of having to count on true freshmen. And I thought, hey, I think Joenel Aguero can do this. But, even though he didn't actually end up earning that job, I don't so much think it was a function of Joenel Aguero not having the goods and not being that type of player. It was more a function of Tyke Smith just playing out of his mind. Tyke Smith made me a fool because he played far better than I'd seen him play at any point in his Georgia career. Now, to be fair, he was dealing with injuries prior to that, but the dude just had a ridiculously good senior season. Was like, I think, borderline all-American caliber how he played at that star position for us, was a really critical position in the Georgia defense. But, that was certainly a factor. Then Joenel Aguero, being a young guy, trying to learn a complicated defense, it was just hard for him to break in the lineup. It just didn't happen, right? And I was wrong on that. But here's the thing. This year, neither obstacle is in his way going into 2024. Tyke Smith is gone. Joenel Aguero is no longer a true freshman. He's been here now for 2 full springs. He was an early enrollee ahead of the 2023 season. He got the majority, the lion's share of the reps with the number 1 defense at star in the spring. I thought he looked really good in G-Day when he got some time last year in garbage time in the 2023 season. I thought he did some really good things, both against the run, in his run fits, also in pass coverage. And look, I think that Joenel Aguero, the reason I'm so high on him, he is the prototype body for what Georgia and Kirby Smart are looking for at the star position, where you're big enough, stout enough, strong enough to fit against the run in the box, which is a lot of what we ask our star defender to do, because it's essentially a hybrid linebacker corner. Like, that's essentially what that position is in our defense. So you've got to be able to fit against the run in the box. He can do that. He's a very physical player. But you also have to be able to cover some of the smaller, shiftier, quicker slot receivers from the opposing team. He's also shown the ability to do that. Now, he was matched up with Dominic Lovett a lot at G-Day. Now, Dominic Lovett won his fair share of those matchups, but Joenel Aguero also won his fair share of those matchups as well. In fact, some of the big catches that Dominic Lovett had on Joenel Aguero at G-Day, go back and watch the tape, guys. Joenel Aguero is in fantastic position. We just had this guy named Carson Beck, who's the best returning quarterback in the country, was dropping dimes, and Dominic Lovett's a great receiver, and he's making plays in the ball. I mean, Joenel Aguero is in position. He's right there in his hip pocket. I mean, sometimes where the ball is placed, it's just indefensible. And some of those throws, that was the case. But he is the prototype of that position. He can do it all. He can do everything we ask our starter defenders to do. He's also a great blitzer off the edge. He is the presumptive starter at star. And if you're a rising sophomore and you're a presumptive starter, certainly what we saw from him at G-Day and throughout spring practice, working with the number 1 defense pretty much the entire way, you got to be on this list. And you got to be pretty high on this list, again, if you're going to probably start for Georgia. Now, Kyron Jones is a guy, maybe KJ Bolden, maybe Dalen Everett if we decide to slide him inside because we like a couple other guys on the outside. We have so many guys who don't play at corner. Maybe one of those guys will have something to say about that. But right now, with his size, his athleticism, his physicality, his now experience in the system, I think Joenel Aguero is the odds-on favorite to start for Georgia at the critical star position. I think he's going to play a big role in the Georgia defense and have a big sophomore season. So I've got him coming in at number 2, expecting a major sophomore surge from Joenel Aguero. And then coming in at number 1, I've already spoiled it, talked about him a couple times already, is inside linebacker C.J. Allen. Played in all 14 games for Georgia last year, 5 starts on the year, and we saw flashes. I know when I talked about Railen Wilson a bit earlier, I was mentioning C.J. Allen, kind of sounded like I was hating on the guy. Not my intention whatsoever. There were points last year where I was critical of C.J. Allen, but it's also relative to the fact that he was a freshman. Yes, he had some freshman moments, but he was a freshman, right? As far as your typical freshman goes, C.J. Allen was far more advanced than your average freshman, which is why he was able to play in all 14 games and able to start 5 games. He's a big reason why Pop Dumas Johnson, who was good for Georgia, has some deficiencies in certain areas, but was good for Georgia, is the reason why he transferred out and went from Georgia to Kentucky. You don't make that move just because you think Kentucky's got a better chance to win than Georgia. That ain't the case, because Kentucky's offering you a higher NIL package. That's not the case. You go from Georgia, Kentucky, because you see the writing on the wall with guys like C.J. Allen, also Railen Wilson, these young guys that were eating into your snaps last year and are in line to only do so even more in 2024. So he saw the writing on the wall. He exited stage left, and that paved the way for CJ Allen, I think, pretty clearly to be the starter for Georgia opposite Smile Munnon at the inside linebacker position. Wasn't perfect. There were plenty of fresh moments, like with Railen Wilson. There's a lot of times you can see it on tape, guys. I know everyone thinks that, and I think people think I'm critical of CJ Allen because I think the general idea of CJ Allen and the Georgia fan base from last year was like he was just incredible. Like he was an all SEC caliber inside linebacker, and that just wasn't the case. He had some really good moments. He did some really good things, like Ole Miss. He was unbelievable. If he played the way he played against Ole Miss in every other game, he would have been all SEC. He was like all SEC caliber that week against Ole Miss in that first start following Pop Dumas Johnson's injury the week before against Missouri. He would have been all SEC if he played like that all year long, but he didn't. In that game, he did. He was the SEC freshman of the week that week, and deservedly so. But in other games, there were moments, like Auburn in particular, early in the year, Georgia Tech later in the year at times, where as a freshman, you're thinking too much. Like he's ahead of the game compared to most freshmen, but you're still a freshman. You don't have that experience. So you're thinking a little bit out there, a little more than you would typically like to. You're hesitant. You're not quick in your reads. Your steps slow. You're allowing the blockers, the linemen to get to the second level and to get on you. And once they get on you, you have a tough time getting off of them. You would see that a little too much from CJ Allen last year. But again, you also saw the signs of what he's going to be. All right. The physical tools are there. The size, the speed, the athleticism, that combination, and the football IQ, because he doesn't have a high football IQ. It was just a freshman last year. That combination makes it pretty clear he's poised to take over for Pop Dumas Johnson this year and play extraordinarily well for Georgia. I think all the experience he got last year, the bumps and bruises that he took, the growing pains that he experienced last year, and there were some guys for every freshman, there's going to be growing pains, and CJ Allen was not immune to that. But all those things are going to pay off for him in a huge way. They'll pay big dividends this year because he's not going to have to worry about that. And if G-Day was any indication, CJ Allen is primed not just for an all-SEC caliber year, potentially an all-American caliber season this year at inside linebackers. What I saw from him at G-Day was just different, guys. He looked like he'd gotten his body in a little better shape. He's still a big guy, but look, he'd slimmed up a little bit, moving a little faster. Maybe that was a function of him also just reacting more and not thinking as much, but he wasn't, guys. He wasn't thinking like that, like he was last year on the field. During G-Day, I know it's a small sample size, right? And I know, like, you see those same plays, the same offense in practice all week long. I get that. But the dude was just a heat-seeking missile. He'd see ball, get ball. He wasn't thinking. He's meeting guys in the hole. He's running guys down sideline to sideline. He's making ridiculous, like, falling backwards interceptions, showing that kind of athleticism. This dude is the real deal. He is going to be a big-time player, again, not just for Georgia, not just in the SEC, but nationally, as far as inside linebackers go. He could be one of the best inside linebackers in the entire country. That's my expectation for CJ Allen going into this 2024 season. So there you go, guys. That is my top 5 sophomore surge candidates. Now, real quickly before we get out of here, this was the hardest top 5 list I put together all summer long, all right? They're never easy because there's always more than 5 guys I want to put on there. But this list, by far, hands down, was the most difficult because there are a lot of sophomores, rising sophomores from that 2023 class that I think are in line to play much bigger roles this year. So I'm going to go through a couple of honorable mentions here for you that did not make the list, but I feel guilty not having them on there. Some of you might have been wondering, like, why is this guy not on the list? So let's just run through a couple of those here real quick. Damon Wilson Jr., outside linebacker. He certainly worked himself into a role last year on third downs. He was a kind of a fixture later in the year in our third down dime package when we got teams in third and long situations as like a designated pass rusher, kind of like Jalen Walker at times. But the issue with Damon Wilson, it's not an issue. The reason he didn't make the list is I still don't know if he's going to be able to do more for Georgia this year than just be that kind of designated pass rusher, kind of like a specialist in a way, like a situational player, because I still don't know if he has the size to hold up on the edge, setting the edge against the run. And we know that was an issue for Georgia last year. But, I mean, guys, like last year, he's playing, 235, 240? He needed to add a little bit of weight. I mean, you saw him out there on the field. Yes, dynamic, explosive pass rusher, but just rail thin for an edge player. He needed to add weight. And reports coming out of the summer are he's added some good weight. How much? I need to see it. I don't know. So until I know that he's added enough weight, until I know that he's gotten more proficient at setting the edge against the run, which will allow him to play more than just on third down situations, I can't really have him ahead of the other guys that I had on this top 5 list. But I'm high on him, thinking he'll be a good player for Georgia. I just need to see him add some weight to be more of a full-time player. Daniel Harris is a guy that if he ends up starting at cornerback, he's locked in a battle right now with Julian Humphrey and Ellis Robinson IV there to start opposite Dalen Everett at cornerback. And he very well could start. He could win that job. And if he does, he absolutely should be on this list. If you're going to start as a sophomore, you should be on this list. But again, I don't know if he's going to start. He's got to win that job. So I can't put him on there without knowing if he's going to win the job. Because he doesn't win it. Maybe there's a rotation of sorts at cornerback. Maybe not. I don't know. There's a little too much uncertainty there. I would say largely the same thing with Monroe Freeling at right tackle. Locked in a battle with Xavier Truss. But with Truss's experience playing guard and tackle for Georgia and being a sixth-year guy, you probably think he's going to start for Georgia to open the season. But there's a world where Monroe Freeling, who's highly talented, he's a better athlete than Truss in my estimation, just to have the experience. But if he can win that job, then he should be on this list. But I think you got to lean towards Truss right now. Will there be a rotation there? Probably. But I don't know. There's too much uncertainty there to have him on the list. But I could hear someone, if you want to argue Monroe Freeling should be on the list. Anthony Evans is a guy that I'm crazy high on moving forward for Georgia at the receiver position. But the issue for Anthony Evans, explosive, dynamic playmaker. We started to see that more at the end of last year, certainly in the Florida State game, the bowl game, more than anything. But this guy is just a big play waiting to happen. Problem for Anthony Evans this season is that he's primarily a slot guy. That's really what he is. And we have Dominic Lovett, who's also primarily a slot guy, and he's just going to be ahead of Anthony Evans. Anthony Evans is going to – we rotate our receivers fairly frequently. He'll get some reps, but I don't know if he'll play enough with Dominic Lovett in the picture. I don't know if he'll play enough this season to warrant being on this list ahead of some of these guys that I do have in my top 5 sophomore surge list. And the last guy here, Lawson Lucky, who was coming into the fall camp after spring practice, he was the guy more than anyone in last year's freshman class that was getting all the hype, all the love going to fall camp. Now, he suffered an injury in fall camp, sent him back a little bit. He didn't play the first couple of weeks. I still think very highly of Lawson Lucky. I think he's going to be an awesome player for Georgia, and he's going to play a role in our offense this year. I have zero doubt about that. But I think I'm higher on Stanford tight end transfer Benjamin Rosick. I think I'm higher on him than the average Georgia fan. I think the guy is a freaking stud. I think he's a perfect fit for what Brock Bowers did at that mover tight end to be that heir apparent to Brock Bowers. Now, Lawson Lucky can do some of those things too, but I'm very high on Urosic. I think Urosic is going to likely be the primary guy at that mover tight end role that Brock Bowers played the past couple of years. But I do think Lawson will play some as well. I just, with Urosic coming over and the production he's had at the collegiate level, I just don't know if Lucky will get enough opportunities in the passing game to warrant being on this list ahead of the other 5 guys that did make the cut. So those are my honorable mentions. I know you could probably make an argument for any of those guys to make it, but they just barely missed out on the cut. But that's it, guys. That is the top 5 sophomore surge list heading into the 2024 season. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now, like the video, comment, let me know what you think, and of course, check out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcasts for a lot more Georgia football coverage just like this leading into the 2024 season, and of course, all the way through the 2024 season as well. Thanks for being here, guys. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs.
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.